time grief would go. Gotta learn to let it go. Once asleep, now awake, feeling every breath you take.
Welcome to Wake the F Up podcast, hosted by Alix and David Long, where we talk about living consciously and helping people uncover their essential selves so that they can stop sleepwalking through life. Our goal is to create a safe space where our guests can share how they've decided to wake the F up and become mindfulness experts through their own emotional healing journey. Welcome to Wake the F Up podcast. I am your host, Alix Long, along with my husband, David Long.
Hi.
We are so excited to come in today. We're laughing because we just literally recorded for 40 minutes and realized we didn't hit record. So you'll get some really cool extra takes this time around. But welcome to May. We are in what we're calling the mother of all months. Man, we had a lot of good things to say in our last 30 minutes. We're going to try to recap for you. So today we are here talking about all things mothering and the mother wound, attachment theory and styles. And we're going to just kind of dive into those main topics. So how we become the people that we become through the lens of our caregivers, specifically this month, our mothers. So as we're approaching Mother's Day, happy Mom's Day or Mother's Day to all the moms out there. It is such an honor to be a mother. And the more that you listen to what we're talking about today, the more it really puts in perspective how important our role is in our children's lives. And as I am swelling, we're halfway there. It's really, really resonating with me. What's more important to me these days about becoming a mother again and getting the opportunity to sit in this seat, nearly 11. It'll be 11 years this week for my youngest. She's turning 11 since I gave birth to her. And that's a lot of time and reflection time. A lot has happened in those 11 years. Obviously, we have gotten married. We're having our first child. We have lost our spouses. We have walked death paths, funerals, friendships, moves, job changes. So many things have happened. I actually did those like damn recaps from your photos from your phone came up, and it was like 2 years ago today. And 2 years ago today, we were like packing and prepping for our wedding. I had like all the clothes picked out for our trip for our wedding. You could see everything was like wedding prep. I was like getting ready to get married to David. 5 years ago, I was in Disney World for Kate's birthday. That would have been clearly the May before Carl passed away. He was on hospice and super sick, and we trekked and took a plane to Disney and did that whole thing. 10 years ago, this is literally his first chemo treatment, and we were well underway into radiation and chemotherapy for the first round before his big surgery in July. So it's crazy when you look at how many things happen in your world, and as a mother, it puts a little bit of perspective into how our life, when you look back at your 2 years ago, your 5 years ago, and your 10 years ago, how much has shifted in your life, how that can impact how you are as a caregiver, right? So the world around you never stops spinning. Doesn't matter if tomorrow I die, God forbid, the world will keep spinning. And life has to go on. So even in difficulty, mothers are still mothering. Fathers are still fathering. Jobs are still had to be done. And we are working from that lens as caregivers all the time. So there's a lot to carry as mothers. And I want to give honor to the mothers out there because it's really, 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 really hard to be there all the time. And there's a lot of expectations for mothers. And I actually think sometimes I laugh like I'm a little bit of a feminist. And then the older I get, I still love the option for the freedom. But the more I realize that I need help and that traditional roles may have been set for a reason. The patriarchy behind them is where I think things went terribly, terribly wrong. Suppressing women is not good, but I also think that traditional roles, man, I actually need the support of the fatherly role in order to be my best mothering self. And when Carl was super ill, I really struggled without a father figure, both being a single mom after he passed and while he was really ill and down, to be all the things that I wanted to be as a mom. So to the single moms out there, huge shout out to you. To the mothers who have lost children, huge shout out to you. I don't know that there's anything more difficult than losing a child. I have thankfully never done so. And to our mother-in-laws who have lost their babies, they're incredibly brave. And I think that that's a wound that never goes away. I think all grief is, but I think that's an incredibly hard day, that Mother's Day, the most special day of your life, is becoming a little bit challenging. There's actually like a pre-Mother's Day for mothers who've lost their children to be celebrated this week. So happy Mother's Day to all the moms out there. And we're going to be talking a lot about moms. We'd like to say happy Mother's Day to our moms who put up with a lot of our shit with this podcast, and to our children who are starting to become very much more aware and are like, my PE teacher I was listening to your podcast, and can you not talk? Can you quit that job in general?
Yeah, it's funny when you talk to them about that, it basically boils down to they would just assume you're not.
Right.
It'd be great if you have to exist.
Don't exist in their world.
Exactly. If you could just stay out of their...
Hide as much as possible.
Right.
I'm like, let's talk about that being the role of a mom. Like, especially to boys. Like, I have to laugh. Like, you want your mother to be there, be there, be there. They're like super attached to their mothers until they're not. And then they're like, can you... Bye.
Just
like,
go
you
away.
just being a woman is annoying. Can you go away from me permanently?
Right.
So mothers get, the hardest job. And so when we're looking at what we're going to talk about today, which is the mother wound, it's the things that we do as a mother, subconsciously or consciously, in protection of our children. We hand parts of ourselves that we are, and I believe that the mother wounds come from the unhealed parts of ourselves. And me as a mother, I have given my children lots of wounds. And my kids are deep in therapy, and they're getting to verbal teenage ages where I am hearing what I have done. And let me just say,
That's right.
As we sit on the show and talk about our moms, we love our moms. We know you did an amazing job. We wouldn't be sitting in these seats without all the hard work and love and effort you put in. Unfortunately, that's not what this show is about. It's not about, we really don't talk necessarily always about like the positive side of what their impact in our life is. We talk about woundedness, and we talk about trauma, and we're talking about healing. And so in that way,
saying that, there is a grateful side to everything that we talk about.
There is. We have a lot of gratitude for our mothers and all the mothers out there, because there's no guidebook for parenting. You love a person. It's time to have a child. Often it's like the right time. You want to climb the ladder, build the things, and do this life together. And connection is a reason to be alive as a human. And having children is the most important connection you can make, essentially, with your partner and with your children. And so, natural part of life to want to procreate and have children. Yet again, there's no guidebook. And so you go into these places not knowing a thing. You think, oh, well, it's all about... I remember thinking, and even as I'm prepping now for this baby, we're 20 weeks, halfway there. I'm like going through bottles and going through bassinets. I think I ripped through our bank account this weekend. I bought all the things. David's stuff has gotten very expensive, by the way, everyone out there. High chairs and bassinets are next level costs these days.
They're crazy.
Crazy expensive. So it's expensive to be a mother. There's more pressure than ever. And there's more information than ever. And so making right choices feels harder than ever. However, we're making all these choices. And I remember as a first-time mom thinking, like, if you just set the stage, if you just get the framework, if you just have it look right, because I know that the love is in my heart, right? That's an innate thing for me. But I felt like if I had it all looking right and they were acting right, then it was right. Yeah, that's a disaster. So if you feel like that, like if my kids just don't get in trouble and they get good grades and they have the resources that they need to have the opportunities, they'll have a beautiful life. I'll be a great mom. That'll be a great experience for them. I mean, in some ways that's not wrong, right? Maslow's hierarchy of needs, really important, triangle you can look at. All kids need safety. All kids need shelter. All kids need nourishment, resources, so food and love. All kids need a sense of belonging. Now, attachment theory is what we're going to be talking about and focusing on today, and then the repercussions of lack thereof and attachment issues comes mother wounds. And so mother wounds, we're going to talk about today, can also be inner child wounds if it came from other caregivers. But all of that falls under the umbrella of the ability for your mother to show up for you and be present and connected to you. So be there for you. When you cry out as an infant, mommy, 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 like you don't have words, you don't have mobility yet, you have no way of giving yourself those basic hierarchy of needs. So therefore, from the first 6 months of your life, you are solely reliant on your mother, and there isn't cognition in our brain before 6 months to understand that when I cry, that will signal you to come get me. So we start to learn. So actually, attachment theory begins, of course, in the womb, right? How we handle, how we nurture our children, the stress that we carry or don't carry, the love that we give our in utero baby through delivery, but the imprinted style does not begin until 6 months. When the baby is able to know that I'm crying, my mom should be coming to get me, or my caregiver. No one answered. When they answered, they were frazzled as hell, anxious and disorganized. When they answered my cry, they were angry, pissed at me, didn't have the damn time, disorganized, right? When I cried and I needed you, nobody came. Cry, 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 no response, no response. I'm just left to the point where I start to learn that when I cry, no one will ever come for my safety or to answer my call. These imprint in our brain, literally a map, a roadmap of survival skills from infancy, where we learn to self-soothe and we learn to care for ourselves in order to have our needs met, right? So from 6 months to 24 months, we start to acquire these survival skills to get what we need. And we learn quickly who we can go to for help, who will listen to our cry. And then the mother wound is, that imprint is there and it's pretty stable inside our subconscious and deep in our back brain. However, we can unlearn that. We can change that. Like your mother could have been, like I like to say that I caused a mother wound in my children, especially my youngest. When Carl was sick, I had to stop breastfeeding early. She went on vacation with my sister for a month during his massive surgery. And I wasn't there for her for a month, right? So I weaned breastfeeding quickly, and then we had to do this massive surgery, and he couldn't pick the kids up. He had chest tube, feeding tube, breathing tube, and a huge suture line. So if he picked up anything over 10 pounds, could have ripped his suture and would have caused a fatality. All of that had to be relearned over a 6-month course. And so within that, my children didn't come back into our house until it was kind of advised for them to not really be around this kind of potential trauma for at least minimum 2 weeks. And so I was so grateful. My sister took my kids for a month on vacation with them for the summer. They were off for the summer doing things. And that was the right decision for us at the time. However, it made some imprints on her at 11 months old permanently, where she was probably looking for me, not quite verbal all the way, right? Under one. I leave her breastfeeding, probably her number one sense of comfort. And she goes with my sister, who lived in a different state. So although totally safe, not a familiar caregiver, with siblings that she never had before, and just everything in her little world changed. So when she was 1 and 2, she definitely had some acting out and very attached to me and very, very anxious. When I went to work, when she went to school, was I coming to get her? And I knew right away because her play therapist told me she had an anxious attachment style disorder at the time. I'd like to say it's a style now because we worked really hard from there on to get out of it. But I learned that sometimes even the best of parents can be in circumstances, and this creates a environment where you literally cannot physically be there. I mean, even as a single mom, I felt like in order to care for their needs, their basic needs, I had to be gone more than I would have chosen to, which can lead to attachment issues. So Do you want to say anything on attachment? And we've been diving deep into this for a while, actually, because it's come up a lot in our therapy. It comes up a lot in our kids' therapy as we're getting to know them, their attachment styles. Losing a parent can make for an attachment issue, right? Their mother, on his side, ripped from them in 20 minutes. My kids, a long traumatic loss with their father, so losing little bits of him along the way. And so there's still a different kind of, it's not same as yours. It's a little less anxious. It's a little bit more not believing anyone will ever be there. It's a little more long haul-y. And so attachment styles are really important. They're not permanent. They're not fixed, right? You might have an innate fixed belief system that's put into that back brain as an infant. But they're changeable, they're fixable. That's kind of the hope of it all. But how your mother was able to show up for you from 6 months to 24 months, ideally, will be reflected in your relationships for the remainder of your life until you learn to become aware of it, bring it to your attention, how it impacts you. Talk about your inner voice, that's the mother wound that pops up. So the voice in your head that's telling you you're not good enough, you're not seen, whatever it was that you maybe couldn't get from your mother. And honestly, I think it's important that we notate that these wounds from our mothers came from their mothers and fathers, right? And so these stories keep being passed down until we stop and take a peek at them. And so in all loving respect with our mothers, as we maybe dive into some of our mothering wounds, we just want you to know that it's okay to look at this stuff. There's not a single person in the world that's secure in every possible way. We did learn that, which was kind of oddly negatively hopeful, because it's a lot of pressure to be human, aka flawed, aka figuring this shit out as we go with no guidebook, and then to have the pressure of being there for your children and securely attaching in every way possible in this multitasking, keep it perfect,
super complicated
world where we're being asked to do a bajillion things and stay totally regulated. The thing is, the outside world that has asked so much of us is all bullshit. The inside world, what really matters in terms of attachment theory and attachment with our children, has nothing to do with social media, has nothing to do with, the latest, greatest stroller. It has nothing to do with the house or the car you drive. It does have to do with your basic hierarchy of needs. You need food, you need shelter, and you need enough time and money to be able to connect with your children. Beyond that, if you can really think about being a parent, your babies really need very little. Food, shelter, to be clean, and they need your attention. They need your attention. So when they cry, they need your attention. When they need you before they can provide for their own needs, they need your attention. And it's really got me thinking about the way that I prioritize, and even the way I think about maternity leave, and I haven't always had the resources or time or ability to have the choice. I race back to work because that was what kept my family stable, and many of us are like that, But it doesn't, and I learned in parent-child interaction therapy, and I write about this in my blog this month. It was a therapy program I did with Kate when she had some trauma from me having to leave her in that very pinnacle point. So she got a little bit sassy in her 2-year-old years and was having some trouble at school. And she was acting out. And so her therapist encouraged us to go to parent-child interaction therapy. And this is a trauma-based therapy for kids. It's a play therapy where we learn to communicate with each other. And I actually learned to parent and teach her secure attachment through my language. Let me just tell you that this was eye-opening, and I was terrible at it in the beginning. The rules are you play a game, you set the stage, and she got to choose what we played. So we had 4 choices to play. Coloring was one of them. We'd color together. Maybe something non-complicated like checkers or a puzzle. Let's just say a puzzle. And so we often colored together because she liked to draw at the time. And so you would go communicating back and forth. And really the goal, the overarching goal, that, or at least my takeaway from it, I'm probably botching this, so sorry to the parent-child interaction therapist if I say this wrong, but essentially what I learned was I kept making corrections subconsciously. I kept making comments based upon what she should be doing, not what she was doing. And so in it, the coach, the therapist would like hit a buzz in my ear. So I had an AirPod in, and that she would in my ear be like, "Don't say that," and not in a bad way, but just said like, redirect, say something that you see right now, affirm her in the moment. So be in the moment. So what I would end up being like the only things I could say to her would be like, "Oh, you chose a red crayon. Cool. Look at that. You made her face blue. That's cool." Like, where my instinct as a mom was to be like, "Well, color her face in the line right there." Like, or, "Ooh, she'd be pretty if you put a pink crayon in her hair," you know. Or like you'd redirect and be like, "No, keep the crayon in the flower." Like, you know, like you're just trying to guide them. Like, and it wasn't in a loving space, not like hyper correction, but I had recognized immediately that I needed her. I needed to control. I controlled a lot of her decision making, correction based thoughts and communication was going on all the time while she was in play scenarios, while we were in togetherness. And in that, all she was hearing was, "I'm wrong, I'm wrong, I'm wrong, I'm wrong, I'm wrong, not doing right, not doing right, not doing right." Super subconscious by me. But at that time, nothing was in my control. You know, our world was falling apart. Carl was uber sick, chemotherapy every single week. I mean, throwing up, emergency room once a week, a baby, you know, potty training. You know, my 2-year-old obviously was toddler potty training. I had Carl was gifted in 3. Like, shit was crazy. And whatever I could control, like keeping my kitchen clean or making sure my kids didn't make too many mistakes. Like, I just wanted them to be okay in whatever capacity they could. And the world judges us as mothers by our children's behavior. And when your kids are not okay, immediately you feel that you're the problem. And to be honest, we are the problem most of the time, if you really think about it. But it's not in the problem that we think. It's not in that they're outside of the line coloring of life, emotionally speaking, is the problem. It's actually that our inability to truly calm down, trust, and connect. So we're lacking security in the fact that they're going to be okay, and therefore we get all this anxious interaction. And so that is a example of a metaphor of all of parenting.
For sure.
Where I'm like, so the therapist ended up telling me that in order for our children to feel loved and connected with, okay, so she was 2. And this, I think the time increases as the age increases, but it required 3 to 5 days of 30 seconds to 1 minute of me affirming her. Playing, no distractions, looking at her and affirming her. And it blew my mind to think I was reading books, I was doing Pinterest birthday parties, I was making sure she had the best shoes and the coolest outfits and the best playground to play at and dance class, but I was running myself ragged so that at the points of play, the thing that matters the most, the times where she feels connected to me, and bedtime, right? Hurry the fuck up, get to bed, I gotta clean and do laundry and get ready for next day. I wasn't spending any time affirming her. I was, get your shoes, put them by the door. Let's make our lunch. Let's do this. Hurry up. Shower. Yeah. You know, it's like that's the interaction. And it's, of course, what we have to do to get things done when we live the external life. Anyway, that's a long-winded story because that's, I guess, who I am. But to talk about attachment. And so we worked for months and months with this therapist on my communication dialogue. And we got more into like potential timeout situations if she got into trouble or acted out, like how I could affirm her and those scenarios. So we started with basic play and worked our way outwardly. But it was really, really impactful to me for the rest of my life, where I started to think about my role as a mother was a lot simpler than I had made it. But in fact, it was a lot more complicated because I had allowed my worldview of what was important to her and to me in order to be what I thought was loved. I had added all these external things that had nothing to do with her feeling connected to me. So for those of you out there who are suffering maybe like financially or struggling, like this didn't cost very much. This would actually cost nothing to interact in this way.
Yeah,
So,
I think that's been shown over and over again. That
yeah.
parents that don't read to their kids, parents that don't even watch TV with their kids, miss a lot of missed opportunities to connect. I did the same thing. I mean, I definitely needed them to be a certain way so that I could breathe.
Yeah.
That's the way it felt. I felt like I needed them to be, productive and hardworking and quiet, and not always quiet, but quiet when it needed to be quiet. And yeah, I mean, you put all that on them, unfortunately, subconsciously sometimes.
Well, and so when we're talking about the mother wound, it's the parts and pieces of us that we're trying to prevent them from harm, right? The places that we felt not good enough as children will always be inside of us. And look out for my blog this month. It's about essentially what I'm calling the inner child tantrum. So it's the tantrum within. So like when we're hit with other people's expectations of us, or a trigger of some sort that reminds us of a time where we weren't lovable, good enough, you name it, whatever our wound is, our mother wound is, or even our parental wound, we hit the inner child that's not healed, that's not been looked at, that's been shoved away, and we're like, we shouldn't even care about that memory back then. But it is the voice in our head, and it is an imprint, and it is actually, if it comes from 6 months to 24 months, it's actually in your brain. It's a mapping in your brain where we rewire to get ourselves to safety. And so when that happens, we literally kind of have these reactionary behaviors that it's like an adult tantrum. Mm-hmm. But it's actually your inner child. It's that little you that never got seen, heard, validated, and loved. And so as mothers, we have to be a little bit careful that we're not projecting our shit on our kids. And this is why we are here doing this work, is because I do a lot of this. I think David and I do a lot of this for our kids, actually, for our relationship, is to show up and try to improve so that we can show up for them and be more connected in this very fragile and one life 100%. That we have.
I mean, that's, you don't do it for them, but they can benefit greatly from it, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'm sure people will disagree with that. I'm sure there are people that are adamant and have written books about. I know books that have. When I was having my kids 15 years ago, one of the most popular books, and I'm going to say it because I assume it's no longer popular, was Baby Wise.
Mm-hmm. I remember that.
Baby Wise was a huge, and it was marketed as the way to raise your children if you were two professional people, like if in the two working
right
family. And it was marketed 100%, like in your face. Now that I can say it out loud, it's like outrageous. But at the time, it was marketed about how you can raise your kids where they will impact your life as minimally as possible.
That's comical.
Which now that, I mean, it seems outrageous to say that. But I think there's a significant amount of people that live, and I was one of them, that live in such high anxiety in the dual professional world that you latch onto anything that would say, oh shit, this can make my life easier, or this can make, and it was marketed, of course, that if you do this, not only will your kids be safe, but you'll be able to work and be successful and all that.
I always like to remind our listeners out there to check in and somatically in these moments.
Yeah, my point is that there's two sides to this coin. I mean, there's people that have embraced the control and the putting your stuff on your kids, and
I don't think they're aware that they put their stuff on their kids, but the control 100%. Like if we can control our kids, but this is what I'm saying with somatically. Like if you can get in your body and as a parent and check in with like maybe how you really don't feel safe, don't feel like right in your body, like your body's sending you signals of anxiety and whatnot. I actually think parenting from a somatic lens is a really, really cool place to be, because the external world can flood you with a lot of ideas about who and what you're supposed to be as a parent, and it is confusing. And I have been well known to partake in a lot of things that really, in theory, might work for some, but don't work for mine. You know, it's like our kids are all individuals, and they, there isn't a one size fits all with even any of these theories we're talking about.
And also kind of the zero-sum game mentality too. Like, I don't know what to do with my kids, and if I make the wrong decision, something really, really terrible, it's ruined their entire life. And that's just not the case. I mean, the truth is, as parents, we're going to continually make mistakes, and the kids are going to continue to make mistakes even when you're not making a mistake. And I think the semantics is important. Like when you have what do I do with my kid in this blank situation? It can be very difficult if you ask 10 people, you get 10 different opinions. All of them feel extremely
not fitting towards your
strongly, and none of them feel good. Then you have to kind of listen to what feels right inside and know that it might be a mistake.
Yeah, agree.
And that's okay.
Okay, so we're here to talk a little bit about attachment theory quickly. So attachment theory came about as early as the 50s. So John Bowlby was the creator of attachment theories in the 1950s, studying mothers and children. Noticing from early ages how important it is for the response of the mother to the child, and how their connection then is indicative of their relationships in the future. There was future studies in the 60s that fine-tuned this, and since then we've been studying, and I think there's not a single psychological theory that doesn't root us back into our childhood. And therefore, rooting us back into our childhood, there's not a person in the world that wasn't born through a mother. And so our mother is actually our first, if you think about it, so powerful. This is like so powerful. And forgive me for having to take these like sacred pauses within it, because as a mother, when you start to think about this, you're like, damn, like sometimes as a mom, you feel so insignificant. Sometimes you feel so unseen. Your job, like, there's all those amazing statistics out there of like, if you were paid as a mother, it's like $250,000 a year job. There's no vacation. There's no time off. It feels validating because it's hard work to parent. And you also get met with like tears, anger,
hatred.
Teenage years are like the pinnacle point where we're at the tail end when we should be tired, and they're like hating you and resenting you, and it's really challenging. It is not easy. And we do all of this for payment and hugs and love. I mean, for free, because we love them. And it's really the most beautiful experience in the world. But the first thing we experience in this life is the sound of our mother, the smell of our mother, the taste of our mother, the way our mother feels. Everything sensory oriented is in our mother. So our first experiential somatic experience in the world through our five senses is in our mother's womb. And it's insane to think about how much the DNA of our parents and the cellular makeup of our first home is in our mother's womb. And so there's archetypes about this, and like can get real woo-woo about this whole situation. Like, don't get me started, because Dave will be like, ooh, we've really lost ourselves here. But the emotional connection and the history behind the womb space and the power of this connection to our mothers is well beyond words. It is innate. It is in every part of our cell. And so there's not a human in the world who doesn't have a relationship with their mother, even if they never knew their mother. They have cellular makeup of their mother. They were housed in their mother. Their epigenetics were created in their mother. Everything that they are and become was from the environmental house. It started there. And of course we can change. We can make lots of change. Our mothers could have been completely involved in our life from birth on, but the makeup of our attachment style is made very, very early before we're able to speak and understand. And that is something that's kind of crazy. And the way the world is shaped isn't very supportive of this. Europeans and a lot of other nations, they give months and months and months off to the mothers in order to shape this extremely fragile time where when they cry or need us, we have time and space to give them what they need. America, we do not think about this. I myself never thought about this with my other two children. Hurried back to work, racing through the bath time, the bedtime. I mean, a very loving and present mom, but I wouldn't say that I was able to show up with all my other responsibilities in full connection to my children in the ways that I could if I had a little more space and freedom. Now that might be idealistic, of course. Like, that's not really how our world is ran. And so it's unrealistic. And so going back to child interaction therapy, can you give the 30 seconds that your children need each day, and that maybe be a priority to like be connected without judgment? So let's run through the attachments. So there's secure attachment, and that's what we're all hoping for. Nearly impossible. The leading study expert, Dan Siegel, is probably like the most experiential expert out there, psychological expert. He's written many books on this. Actually, he and Oprah Winfrey co-wrote a book. Like, there's so much of his stuff. He's amazing. So if you really want to study attachment theory and the attachment styles, he's like your main go-to guy. He would even say that secure attachment in all facets is impossible, as we've discussed. So it's hard to reach. But it's a spectrum. Like, right, you might fall under the different styles at different points in your relationships and your early relationships, including boyfriends and girlfriends, friendships. They actually can take you from secure into a different style. So it's not necessarily your mother wound that got you here, but most likely it is if it's a disorder, if it's on that higher end of the spectrum that is a little like deep in the head and unchangeable. So we've got secure attachment. Anxious attachment style is probably the most common. I would say that's a very, very common one.
It is in our house.
It is in our house. So basically what that means is, like, if it starts in your 6 months to 24-month imprinting time, children experience caregivers who were preoccupied, emotionally unavailable, kind of like hot and cold was what I would describe it. I actually think this is probably our .com age type of mother, right? We've got the cell phone out, we're Instagramming, we're cooking dinner, we've got laundry cranking, we're looking at the calendar for tomorrow, we're giving the snack, but we're kind of we're there in body, but we're not always there. And
or you're super in and super out.
Right, like you're really there, you're really not. Like, exactly.
That's what
trying to do it all.
I've seen a lot of that. Like,
I've been guilty of a lot of that.
Right, that's the helicopter mom.
But it really starts in the baby years. Okay, so that's a little bit older years. That's after 24 months. What we're talking about, probably what we're talking about. But with an infant, it means inconsistency in how you respond to their needs. So their needs are pretty basic: diapering, staying clean, and when they cry, they either need food or they need comfort. And so you may not always be there, and they start to get nervous. Like, is someone coming or are they not? Sometimes you're really there, sometimes you're not there at all. So caution, like, I don't know, this is all there's a lot of stuff out there as a newly pregnant mom to be, about like sleep training. I'm like, and look, girl, I don't like to not get good sleep, but between the ages of, 6 months and all these little visceral times, you got to be a little bit careful if you're trying to get 9 hours of sleep and your baby's crying all night long. I think, this is just my opinion, this has no expertise behind it, but trust your inner dialogue, get in somatically if you feel viscerally that your baby needs you. It's a time where they're not able to manipulate you. Let me just say that. It's not a manipulation that they're crying in the night. They don't have the mindset to manipulate you. They don't have emotions, words. Their brains aren't that complicated yet. They cry because they have needs to be met.
There is some trade-off, though, right?
David and I differ in this. So
if you're a mom and you haven't slept for 10 days, you are not going to be an effective parent for that kid.
Yes, of course. Now, we are the primary caregiver most of the time. Don't get me started on the dads who don't.
I love the advice.
Dads who don't get up to help the mother.
I love the advice sometimes when people tell new moms, like, sleep when the baby sleeps, sleep.
Well, that's not always possible.
Like, when you can sleep, sleep. And that's...
Well, the reason that's not always possible is other children, jobs.
I agree, but I'm just saying...
The endless list of shit we have to get accomplished. Let me say this. Ask your partners for help. Ask your parents for help. Ask your people for help. If your partner is not getting up to help you and you haven't slept in 10 days and they're resting nicely, you need help, right? Like, we cannot do it all. We're one person, and we should not be expected to do it all. That's an unrealistic expectation. So you have partners and people to help you for a reason. And it's a time to ask for help is in the postnatal time, right? So anxious attachment is when there is a heightened sensitivity to abandonment. When you get older in relationships, this looks like a fear that you're going to be left. This insecurity that even when it's good, it's going to fall apart. So when things get really, really good, you might also be like, I don't trust this.
Particularly good, right?
The ground's going to fall out. And so we experience a lot of this in our world because of our kids' losses and our own personal losses. It's incredibly difficult to be connected. So anxious attachment, you have kind of clingy kids, right? You might have kids that really are nervous when you leave. There's some normalcy to that, right? The dropping your kids off at school, like holding your leg. That's the most common imagery. But that can come from their inability to know like when you're coming back, right? And secure attachment would be like when they get to the place like, bye mom, I know you're going to be here because you're here every day to pick me up. Right? So many of us have parents who did the best they could, but struggled to get to us on time. And you can remember the anxiety you felt like, are they going to get me? As a child of multiple kids in my family, I had 6 kids. My mom had a lot to do, and I was always anxious at car line. Like, what did they forget about me? Common feeling, I think that's a common thing that happens to busy moms. So, moving on, we'll go into avoidant attachment. So that's the next style. Avoidant attachment is, I think everyone's experienced this too. This is blocking people out. This is avoiding any connection, intimacy, emotional discussion. Those people who just, you're trying to feel, can't get into that. Mm-hmm. So many of us feel like this because it was taught in a very early age.
Physically too, like don't hug me.
I don't want to be touched. I don't want to talk about my feelings. I don't want to talk about anything dealing with feelings. Completely avoidant of any intimacy at all, any connection in an emotional way at all. They don't trust it, right? And these were children who've experienced emotionally distant parents. Emotionally distant parents who could not show up emotionally at all for their kids, or very much at all. So they didn't see a lot of emotionality. The needs of the kids were very unmet, right? They didn't want to do feelings like go to your room and get yourself together, come back. Like that's an older version of that, but that would be a childhood wound version of I need you, I need you, I need you. Nothing coming from the mother. Nothing coming from the caregiver. Nothing to give. This is a frozen mother, one who isn't able to show up for herself, let alone show up for a child. And asking one more thing from someone else, not going to happen if you can't even give it to yourself, right? And so these children, they learned to suppress their own emotions because showing their emotions was not going to happen. And it makes them block, hide, push people away. They're very self-sufficient. These children are very independent. They learn to get themselves dinner at 4, 5, and 6. They'll be the kids making themselves eggs and, all the things, which is okay. That's actually a good skill. But notice when they know how to do all the parental things at a very young age, they may have a parent who's unable to show up for them and meet their needs, right? And this presents itself in relationships, an inability to connect. They don't really want to get close to people. They're scared to death too. And because in the past, if they've learned that getting close or trying to show their emotions was met with, stonewalling or complete block of emotions, which made them feel extremely alone. Yeah?
Yeah, so I recently learned like a really interesting dichotomy is when the anxious attachment person is interacting with the avoidant attachment person.
So when we have anxious and avoidant, it's often called fearful and avoidant. This is disorganized.
I meant in different people, but yeah, I mean in the same people.
You mean when they're together?
Yeah, when the anxious attachment person is interacting with the avoidant is just reassuring the anxious that yes, they are in fact leaving and not connecting. And the more that the anxious person tries to connect because they really need that connection, the avoidant person pushes further and further and further and further away. That's really hard.
Well, so those of us who
It's
are
hard for those two people to.
yeah, and I think those of us who are anxious, we actually probably need and do better with another anxious, someone who's almost codependently anxious, because we do better with someone who's going to overly tell us, I'm not leaving you, I'm not going anywhere. And to be honest, avoidant probably does best with also another anxious, even though it's challenging and they may be licking each other's wounds. This is every marital problem, a relationship problem you've ever had. Your partner may be one style, and it's usually the opposing style to yours. They say opposites attract. It's not really that. They will feed into the parts that you need to feel secure, right? So that is what appears to be like, ooh, I love it. This is my person. This is my person because he makes me feel secure, because he is so codependent and scared he's going to lose me. And I'm like, I don't need anybody. I can't let anybody in. And he's like, I'm never letting you leave. And you're like, okay, actually, I kind of need that in order to show up. I need to be so secure that when I crack open the deepest parts of me that are scared to death to feel, I want to know that my partner can be there for me, because I can't trust anybody.
It's just a lot of work for both people.
Relationships in general are a lot of work. If you think out there that you are going to be able to just hop into a relationship, never be triggered, and not have any work to do, that it all just works, that's some magical thinking that isn't going to work out for you. You're going to end up in divorce or at least in hiding and resentment for the remainder of your life. So get to know your partners, get to know your relationship styles. This attachment theory, to understand, is like that book, Your Love Languages. It is so important. So you can't know each other's love languages and how to show that you want to be secure for them without knowing, where do they feel scary? What is their deepest fear? What are they hiding from you? What are they avoiding? Because when you know that, it's all the power of the world, right? You're able to say like, hey, and I know David's anxious, like, hey, are you worried that I'm not going to love you because of this scenario? Like, we recently had a thing, and it's like such a thing. Like, when one of our kids will have, and I feel the same way because I'm also anxious. I'm actually a combination between anxious and avoidant. So I'm mostly anxious, but I am avoidant because I have had to be very independent most of my life. And I will block. If I get to a place where I feel threatened, my anxiety that you're not going to love me, that's my deeper wound. But I will block and hide. So I sometimes swing a little bit both ways. The severe end of me will block you out.
I'm consistently anxious.
David is consistently anxious. He's not a blocker. He's so steady Eddie, going to stick into his anxiety. Yeah. And so I know that when one of our kids has a thing, and it's usually one of his kids has a thing that impacts, clearly it's going to impact me in every sort of way because we live together and I love them very much. He worries, and I felt the same way. So this is like a shared, I think, stepfather or step-parenting thing. He worries that I won't love him if I see his kids for who they are. I literally almost broke up with him in the origin of our dating, and literally was like, I'm out. If you can't love my child, and he never even said that, I just got this fear that made me think that I was triggered. I blocked, I did exactly, and then I went into my crazy end, which is the avoidant, and I was like, bye, I'm out of here, and we're done. He did this wonderful anxious thing that fed right into my wound and said, I will never leave you. I'm never going to let you go, which sounded kind of like a stalker really at the time, but I needed it. Like, I almost need stalking mentality to make me feel secure because I'm so anxious that I'm going to be left because everyone in my life has abandoned me in some form or fashion. And then that story is so thick in my mother wound and my father wound that I just keep feeling it over and over. Sometimes it's my own saboteur, but a lot of it is actually in truth. Like, I sometimes can create it, but most of the time it's actually my truest loves have left me. So he said, how about this? Go to one therapy session with me. I'm like, who says this in the dating world? Go to therapy with me and let's just see what happens. And we went to this therapy, and of course the therapist called me out on all my fear. And the therapist was right. I was deathly afraid that no one would ever love my children the way that I love my children, the way that my first husband loved my children, and that I didn't want to try. And they had been through too much pain, and I had been through too much pain that I couldn't be abandoned anymore. It'll make me cry when I think about this. And I I just couldn't do it anymore. I had done abandonment on abandonment on abandonment on abandonment, and it was happening in lots of realms that were my fault without my awareness around me, but the main people in my life had been abandoning me, and it was really, my heart could not do any more abandonment. So by him asking us to go to therapy, we were able to really get into the fear of it at a very early stage in our dating. I mean, we were like 6 months maybe?
Probably 6 months, yeah.
And it saved our relationship. Not only did it establish that the therapist was like, you guys should come once a week. You got a lot to work on with blending 5 kids. I mean, they shouldn't even say blending because we weren't even engaged. But being together and all these 5 kids and all this loss and everything that's happened to you, there's so much to work on here. And I'm like, but this is like everyone's life, you know? Mm-hmm. And so within that, one of our tenets of our, I wouldn't say this is a vow, but it's a secret vow of ours, is that if we get into a space where we want to leave our marriage, we promise to give each other 10 therapy sessions before we decide to do anything like divorce or separation. That we promise each other we fully show up for 10 full sessions saying our truth. And I think it's a really powerful contract because...
We're on number 9. I'm just kidding.
We go to so much freaking therapy, I don't even know. But
I'm just kidding.
So these are why attachment is it's our inner voice, it's our inner mapping, it's our inner fear, and it's how we define connection. And so we talk all the time at Wake about safety and our, you know, you're either going to protect yourself or you're going to go towards connection when you feel safe, right? Or you're going to need to protect yourself because you don't feel safe. And so if you want to be safe in your relationships, you are going to have an attachment style. And I'm going to guarantee that it's most likely not secure, since we know that most people are not secure. It's nearly impossible. Unless we put ourselves in a beautiful bubble, which I'm going to really try to do. I'm like, one of my goals is to try to be as provide as much secure attachment to this baby as I can. And you know what that means? I've had to already start thinking about leaving my work and doing stuff that like is really against a lot of my self-worth and my love as a sacrifice, because I know that that time that I need to not be rattled and pulled apart, I'm going to have to clear other things that I love. And that's parenting. That's parenting.
I am sure that I will have to hold the pendulum from swinging too far.
Probably so.
Because I want to raise an independent child that...
And we're never going to always see eye to eye.
Owns their own life.
You know, David will be the first to say, oh, at a certain point, cry it out. You know, and I'm like, no freaking way.
Well, no, I mean, yes and no. Yes and no. I mean,
these are normal marital things, okay? So, like, it doesn't matter that we study all day long. We still have visceral responses of why. David always felt like his freedom was clinched in by his family's control. I always felt like I was way too free and I was like looking for some kind of like grounding. And so you gravitate towards this attachment style. This is exactly what we're talking about. Your inner dialogue is like, I don't want my kids to be lost in the world. And his inner dialogue is, I don't want mine to be so controlled that they don't have freedom.
Because security is so difficult, secure style is so difficult. But probably the best we can do is going to be to you do the thing that you think, and I'll do the thing that I think. And then the kid will have kind of the best of both worlds. In
theory, that works until you start like bumping heads. But yes, we still have stuff to work on. We're actually in therapy, working with a therapist right now on talking about ahead of the time, like what is our parenting style? What do we want for our children? What's important to us? What's non-negotiables? Like, I never thought to say any of this before my last parent. It's like premarital therapy for our kids. And I'm like, it's actually important. How do you want your postnatal to be? How do you feel about your body? Like, what's non-negotiable? When, like all that stuff.
How do you stay connected with a baby? That's huge.
Yeah, super. And like, there's some cool stuff right now on the internet. I love pop psychology so much, but it's like the number one indication of a baby's happiness is her mother's happiness. And how does a mother stay happy? Well, the mother has to practice mindfulness and self-care in an incredibly challenging time where she may get like 1 minute of sleep, right? So again, having other caregivers in the home is a blessing. I've been the victim of not having that. It's so freaking hard. Asking for help. The white towel when you're like, I can't. Okay, so let's go to the final one. And this sucks when I say the most severe, but it is the most severe on the styles. Fearful, avoidant, which is all is often called disorganized attachment, is the most challenging. That is the one where it's a combo of all the ones minus secure. So it's a combination of anxious, and it's a combination of avoidant. It's often called fearful avoidant. Essentially, this child grew up in a home, generally speaking, of severe neglect and abuse. That's usually what you see in these children. It can be just like neglect to the point where the mother has substance abuse problems is a frequent, just inconsistency. You'll see it in actually stability problems where people may be leaving from an unsafe environment and not have, stability in any sort of home or like that. It's completely difficult for the mom she's trying to get to safety, but there may not be the ability for her to show up for her children. In this, these children are often met with mothers who are angry, abusive, or severely unhealthy within their sense of self. And so, complete dissociation or complete detachment from their own self, and just not living in the same zone as their kid, whether by choice or by circumstances. These children develop really conflicting desires for closeness and independence. So they are met with a lot of abuse when they have needs. They learn to be independent, but they're deeply starving for love and affection. But then they don't trust love. So at the end of it, the biggest overarching thing of this is love was not safe for them as a child. It was taught to be very unsafe to seek out love from their caregiver. And therefore, they learn that they can't trust love. That love is actually the most unsafe. And you'll see this with relationships that show a lot of anger and violence. That's usually a reactionary behavior from a lot of deep fear of actually being seen and being loved. And so I'd like to say, and this is not necessarily documented by the stuff that I've been studying, but this might fall into a lot of abusive relationships. So there might have been some conscious early childhood abuse of neglect and abandonment, and therefore the person doesn't trust love, gets very anxious, and anything that threatens them or gets close to them, violence. So they kind of do both. They need you close, but once you get close, they need you to get away because they don't trust it. They're kind of swinging to all ends of the spectrum, and they don't feel secure on either side of it. This is a harder one to work out of. This is a really hard one to therapize and can take a long time because these are deep set patterns of early abuse generally, not always, but mostly by their caregiver. And therefore, there's a lot of untangling of how to build trust. And you have to start with really small. Generally, there's not a lot of talking about feelings, right? They don't want to talk about anything. They don't want to be close to anybody. So they push you away, and they're angry about it. But deep inside, they need love so badly that they do attention-seeking behaviors and get a lot of validity from that, usually bad attention-seeking behaviors, violent attention-seeking behaviors, so that then they get noticed. So they get attention, and that's about as close as they can get. So you see this with a lot of kids who have a lot of severe acting out, and maybe even what may turn into criminality kind of behavior later in life. Struggling one. This is as it's very difficult to feel stability and love. So in this style, it's all of it, and it's sort of why we're here talking about the mother wound. It's here that we talk about, the importance. It's Mental Health Month, Awareness Month. So it's so important that we work on our mental health as mothers. We are responsible for these little people. It is difficult to be a mother. We're never going to be perfect, but if you're suffering from a really severe mental issue, substance abuse, or anything that really is crying for help, we're going to put some resources in, and we can, and have you, have some resources to potentially reach out to, because it's common. It's really common to suffer from depression and any kind of mental issues. And so, while you're a mother, that's really, it's a lot of giving out. And we learn this about love in general, that we can't love ourselves fully, and definitely can't be loving others if we don't work on the inside of us, because we're always going to be projecting from that space, right? So, a challenging one, and it generally requires some therapy. This one is, all of these, I always encourage therapy, but this is going to take a little bit more deeper untangling because the patterns you're setting to protect yourself and keep safe are really duo and dynamic, right? They're dynamically pushing people away, but trying to draw attention. And so it's the people that are the hardest to connect with. Yeah? So these are the styles, and read up on them. The mother wound is more the emotional, the physical, the psychological repercussions that were validated in the mind. So when we were old enough to have memories, so that starts as, early on for us, that helps, that reaffirm sometimes this. I mean, it can be actually opposite of that, right? We may have a mother who affirmed us in a different way, who was in a bad situation, got herself out of the bad situation, and was able to show up and be present. Like, we can work our way out of these attachment styles no matter how severe. There's hope, because with work and introspection and awareness, what we're teaching here at Wake, and journaling and therapy and lots of ways of like really focusing on somatically connecting with how we feel in the moment, you can actually repattern completely out of any attachment style that you have. And one thing that we know to be true universally for all people, no matter what your attachment style is, if you have a partner that you can be vulnerable with and safe with, that you can communicate with, that you can build trust with, you are more likely to be able to open up and work on this stuff and say your fears and verbalize your past. And that's really important. So vulnerability and holding a safe space for your partner and your friendships in these relationships is crucial for healing. And that's not always easy, right? So we have to see our partners as they are and love them for the truth of who they are. And that can be challenging. Thoughts, David? Very quiet today.
Yeah. I mean, this is well over my head. It's fascinating. It's very useful. Not only with working on myself, but my loved ones.
It's got you a little emotional.
I mean, it's just a lot to think about. I do believe and trust that they are mutable, and that we can change and adapt some of these things that we have had for a long time.
I agree. And that's really hopeful.
I mean, for example, even though I've insinuated that I'm always anxious, I don't always feel anxious. So it's not all the time that I feel this way. But if I feel a way about attachment, it's anxious, but it doesn't mean I always feel that way.
Well, I'm going to end today with maybe like a little bit of hope for those of us who are facing each style. So we have been handing out this free safety guide in our company for like so long. I bet you guys are probably sick of it by now. But it's a powerful tool that's been used many times by lots of different people, and it's just simple. It's like, notice it, name it, attend to it. The reason I'm obsessed with it and I want to spread it, because it's an easy thing to put in your hat and use for any psychological thing you're going through. So notice it. Let's talk about you being anxious, or me being anxious in a situation. I've actually been doing pretty good with my not enoughness lately, which is crazy. But I've actually been doing really good. I'll probably get kicked up in graduation season because I can already feel. We had to pull like graduation pictures for our 8th graders, and I was like, oh my gosh, it is always a reminder that we lived whole lives not together, and their parents should be here. You know, it's just an energy and a sadness and a vibe, and then all the families get together, and then there's this juxtaposition and beautifulness of like the past and the present, the loss and the love, the change and the former, and it's always a lot to carry. In that space, sometimes I can feel like I just feel this deep survivor guilt, and not enoughness springs deeply in my body. And so when I practice that, I can tell you, like at our previous graduation, I felt such survivor guilt. I felt like I noticed like viscerally in my body, like I get a heaviness in my chest on that one, sort of a not breathing sensation. And I feel a deep not belonging, a deep loss of feeling like I have a rootedness or a home or a place that I belong. And I, in fact, feel full guilt flood where I'm like, I shouldn't be the person here. Betsy should be the person here. And when I notice that's coming up for me now, I have repatterned because I feel that a lot. It's not just like the big moments. It can feel so overwhelming that it can actually take me away from the celebratory thing that's like, should be celebrated. It's not fair for me to not show up for our kids like that. Like, it's really usually happy milestones that these happen, actually. Those grieving out there can understand this. It's always like that. The happier events are always a little bit like laced with all the sadness and heavy. And so in that, I notice the feeling in my body generally first. And I've learned through constant reaffirming that I need to name how I'm feeling. And I really actually need to name how I'm feeling and communicate it with David, because on top of the survivor guilt that I feel, I then somehow, then my attachment style pushes me into, he only loves me because his first wife is not here because she died. And in truth, like, he does love me because she died, and I am the one that's here, right? Like, we wouldn't be here if they were still alive, but that's not really, we've made a choice. We're choosing to be here. And so I have to name what's happening to me and just say it to myself, like, this is survivor guilt that I'm feeling. This is my wound that I never am good enough, that I don't belong anywhere. This isn't true. I actually planned this, most likely planned this entire fucking event, this entire operation with all these family members, his and mine, all came in because of my direction, not his. Even the ones that probably are, of course, grieving the loss of someone that is no longer here. They're there because I invited them. And then I have to attend to it. What do I do to get myself to feel better? I have to name to David how I feel. That doesn't always feel great because it's vulnerable, and I have to admit that I don't feel good enough and that I get scared in those situations that you really don't love me. And your grief makes me feel a lot of distance, and it's scary. It's scary because, like, I always feel secondary in my previous familial loves and loves, that I was always secondary to something. And so when your grief gets really, really heavy, I feel really secondary, which is silly, right? And then I get guilt on top of it because I'm like, why would I should not feel, I know better because I get my own grief. Like, I shouldn't feel like this. And this is such a vulnerable topic to talk about. But when I attend to it, I know that I usually am going to have space, a little bit of space in that. So I need to, like, sometimes take a walk, remove myself, journal, ground down. It's helpful if I'm not around triggering people. It is not people's fault, but there are some people that will trigger me up hard in this situation. They can say things that are their truth, but not the truth. They can say things that make me feel like I shouldn't be here. It can happen in our family, like anyone who's been in a family dynamic who's divorced may understand what I'm saying here. Like, you get into family dynamics, like this happened to him at my father-in-law's funeral. Like, people will say stuff at a well-intending meaning, but they are literally reminding you that you are secondary. It's my wound. They don't mean to hit my wound, but they hit my wound, and then I get even more validation from other people that I shouldn't be here. So I usually have to take a sensory break and, like, just get around something safe or loving. It, oddly enough, will also trigger then my deep grief. And I miss being in my first marriage because I miss feeling a sense of home and belonging, where I didn't have to think so hard about being the mother figure. And so I have to attend to a lot of as a widow, you feel a shit ton of layers, right? This isn't just the widow wound, the loss of my first husband, the survivor guilt that I feel being remarried to a person who lost a wife. It's actually deeper rooted in my parental mothering wound and fathering wound that told me, I wasn't lovable in lots of different ways. They did the best they could. I know they both loved me, but regardless, that was the message I received. So that sounded like a freaking lot, but I generally have to be mindful. I generally have to do some somatic work. I generally have to do some mindfulness practices like breathing and centering back and saying, the most powerful thing that I've done, and it works on almost every capacity to attend to it, is I have to remind myself on mental repeat, I am worthy of this love. I'm worthy of being your wife. I am the mother figure in this house, and I love these babies. I am here because she is not, and I honor the role that I am in and know that it is an honor to be the mother of these children from this moment that I came in their life on. I will be here for them, and I will love them with the best of my ability because she can no longer. And I know that David takes that role very seriously for my children as well. And despite the world's opinions of our situation, I know that I am better serving these children and this marriage by being here than by not being here. And that I deserve to be here, and David deserves to be loved. And that's where we go. And I repeat the mantra that I am enough, I am okay, I am lovable. And I make sure to tell my partner when I'm feeling this way so he doesn't double trigger me by double downing on not unawareness. Like, he has no clue. Like, he's in his own grief, I'm in my own grief, and then we're like triggering each other, which we have done before in events, and it did not turn out well for either of us. And this is so notice it, name it, and attend to it in attachment styles. This is really important in the mother wound, is when you're feeling this not good enoughness wound that may have come from really subconscious places, you can mother yourself. And it's so powerful to bring back some sense of control and to reparent the self in the sense that you can be the mother that you always needed, that maybe you couldn't get and your mom wasn't capable of, to say that I am lovable. I am here for you. I will give you what you need. Your body is screaming to attend to it. It is viscerally responding with somatic and nervous system responses that are trying to protect and keep you safe. And when you take a breath and a pause and say, I'm going to attend to myself, I'm going to give myself what I need right now, whether that be whatever it is, and you give some signals to your partner in your relationships, you're allowed to work through this emotionality. And then you know this too shall pass, like everything else. It's just a moment. And it brings up a lot for David because, attachment is challenging, and we feel a lot in this space. We worry about our kids all the time as widows and as remarried and working on ourselves as heavily as we are. We're constantly reflecting on a past where we were a little subconscious, a little unconscious, really. And parenting from the now lens to the past, it's like when you are aware and you look back, you can feel full of regret. And I think it's okay to hold regrets for a moment, but it's most important that you validate the self and say, I did the best that I could with what I knew to be true. And now that I know better, I'm going to do better. And you just mantra to yourself. You forgive the self on repeat as a mother or as a father. All we can do is get better as we learn. The point is to stay awake enough to continue to be open enough to learn. And that's what we're here for. So I am so happy to share all this stuff with you. And we're going to keep working on the mother. So this mother is so tired of talking. I'm sure you're sick of hearing me talk.
Yeah, don't worry. I'll say more next time.
David got a little clump today, so he's deep in thought. So
it's okay.
Thank you guys for showing up today. We're going to put some stuff on our show notes for attachment theory, attachment styles, attachment disorders, some great resources for healing the mother. Look out this week. I'm going to be doing a special meditation for mothering the self and for mothers out there who definitely need lots of love and attention. To all the mothers out there, happy Mother's Day. You do not have to be perfect to show up for your children. We all make mistakes, and I am so proud of you. Keep showing up, keep waking up, keep working on the self. The more you work on the self, the better you will be for yourself, for your children, for your relationships, and for all of those that you love. So, happy Mother's Day.
This has been Wake the F Up podcast, hosted by Alix and David Long. Be sure to check out other episodes where our community of experts share tools and ideas to help you wake to the life inside of you. If you enjoyed this episode of Wake the F Up, please like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Join the Wake community by downloading our app. Just search for The Wake Wellness in the Apple or Android App Store. And follow us on Instagram at The Wake Wellness. Thanks for listening.